The methodology from the Forbes list of most valuable esports orgs is complete dog shit. And here is how we can fix it. Hi, I'm Feferman, and welcome to Esports Unfiltered, where every week we are breaking down some of the news, issues, scandals in the esports and gaming industry. Finally, the Forbes list has come out for 2020, putting out the top 10 most valuable esports organizations. Now, this is a list that I look forward to every year, to dig deeper, to see who's on top, who's in the middle, who got knocked off. So much excitement, and this is a very important list because tons of investor decks and conferences and so much is going to be quoted from this Forbes list. So it's really important data that they're bringing out for the entire esports industry. Man, is this list spicy. So there's a lot of surprises here. So first I want to break down the top 10 for you and then get into a little bit about the methodology and how that makes sense. Or does it? Let's go through the list, starting with number 10. We have T1, valued at $150 million. Change from last year, we don't know, it wasn't actually on the list. If you're in Korea, T1 is a household name. It's as big of a household name as it gets. They've got a League of Legends franchise, a bunch of non-franchise teams, and 60% of the revenue comes from esports. Moving into 9, I was pretty surprised that it's this far down the list, and that's NRG Esports. They are the owners of the now Optic Chicago, as well as the San Francisco Shock in the Overwatch League. They did $20 million in revenue, and 1 year, up 3% year over year. So they're valued at $155 million, good enough for 9th on the list. Number 8, we have G2 Esports, which comes in at a valuation of $175 million, up 6% from last year. Estimated revenue, $19 million, and revenue from esports at 80%. And they've got League of Legends franchise and in a bunch of pretty good non-franchise leagues. You're already starting to see something come up. The revenue numbers don't match from lowest to highest, and this is going to be something I'm going to bring up a bit later. Number 7, you have Enthusiast Gaming. Value $180 million, also a new entrant onto the list. Estimated revenue $95 million. Wow. And just to foreshadow, that's actually tops on this list. But why are they ranked number 7? Good question, and I'm going to answer that methodology. They're known for Seattle Surge, Call of Duty League, and Vancouver Titans, what up Canada, in the Overwatch League. Number 6, also going right back to Korea, Gen G. Yes, they are coming in at $185 million, pretty much flat from last year's valuation. Estimated revenue, $14 million. And they have a LCK, the Korean League of Legends franchise, and play as well in the Overwatch League under the banner, the Seoul Dynasty. Number 5, and again, I probably thought this was going to be 1 or 2, so kind of surprised to see it this far down, is 100 Thieves, valued at $190 million. They had one of the biggest appreciations year over year, up 19% in a year where a lot of orgs were flat or down, and they have $16 million in revenue. And they're known for, of course, their LCS slot, the 100 Thieves, and their new LA Thieves in the Call of Duty League. Moving into number 4, and I thought this was going to be tops on the list, so pretty surprised to see them at number 4 is FaZe Clan. Valuation of $305 million, up 27% year over year, so pretty impressive price appreciation. $40 million of revenue. You know them under the Atlanta FaZe, as well as every single hoodie that ever gets sold in esports is probably coming from one of their companies or 100 Thieves that I just mentioned. Number 3, so top 3 is pretty much similar to last year. You have Team Liquid at $310 million valuation, down 3% year over year, $28 million in revenue, and their big team is Team Liquid in the LCS. Cloud9 suffered a little bit of a disappointment in terms of their valuation from last year. They come in at $350 million, down 13% year over year, and their revenue was $30 million. And they are known for LCS, of course, League of Legends, and maybe you don't know, it's not as tied to Cloud9, but the London Spitfires in the Overwatch League. It is, but Maybe you didn't know, but most people probably watching know. But in case you didn't know, I wanted to point it out. And that leads TSM coming in first place, $410 million valuation. They were valued at 400 last year, so slight uptick, $45 million of revenue, and their biggest property being TSM in the LCS. So that's the top 10. Now, right out of the gate, we can debate who's top, who's bottom, who should be there, who should not be there. But the biggest question is, what's the methodology? How are they valuing these companies this year? And how is it that the revenue numbers are completely out of whack in terms of first and second and third and 10th? So let's dive deeper into how Forbes actually is valuing these companies. Now, last year, they said that the rankings really relied on the capital raises and asset sales, meaning whatever they raised at, in a funding round was their valuation, as well as asset sales was the other. And really, both of those methodologies are pretty flawed. Relying just on capital raising is a huge issue. Hello, WeWork. Just because someone is willing to pay a certain amount for it doesn't mean that everybody else sees the value, and especially when there's only a few investors coming on board. So completely relying on capital raising I understand why you're going to do it, but it is totally flawed. Now, the other way to provide some value and context is asset sales, which is actually a much better metric to use because it really shows the fair market value of a franchise, team, roster, etc. So valuing based on asset sales is better, but there's just so few comparables, at least right now. So even in 2019, you had Echo Fox from the LCS change hands. You also had the Houston Outlaws and the Overwatch League. So this year we saw only one franchise really change hands, and it was a complicated three-way trade where you saw a brand go to one company and a franchise go to the other, and it's still really hard to sort of figure out any valuations based on that asset sale. For 2020, Forbes said it interviewed dozens of investors and analysts and team owners, etc., to try to determine better valuations for these companies, which really is a good thing. But they also mentioned that they were separating esports revenue from non-esports revenue. And this is where the waters get very, 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 very murky. Most orgs have a competitive roster and a content creation roster, and they're critical parts of the business. But Forbes, again, to their credit, they're trying to decipher all of the extras and really decide on who's the most valuable esports org. But does selling a ton of hoodies count as esports revenue? Forbes would say it doesn't. And this is where I feel the methodology is flawed. If you look at a traditional sports valuation, you would include merchandise, you'd include content, you'd include all the ancillary revenues that contribute to building that brand value. That's how we have to look at it here. $100,000 of FaZe hoodie revenue should be treated the same esports related revenue as $100,000 of esports earnings. It's contributing to the esports brand. But I'll be the first to admit that even this methodology has its limits. Half of TSM's revenue comes from Blitz.gg. It's an app that helps players get better, etc. And should that be considered esports revenue? Does that contribute to the brand? I would argue not really. It's not part of the brand and doesn't contribute to its overall value. So we're still stuck. How do we value an esports org? This camera. How do we value an esports org? So we're still stuck. How do we value esports orgs? And I think we have to look at esports as individual sports and brands. And that might be the only way to really have a fair apples to apples comparison. So let's look at the sports world as an example and how they value their franchises. If you look at the Forbes list of most valuable sports franchises, it's single teams. It's the Dallas Cowboys, the New England Patriots, the New York Yankees. They don't lump all of these teams under one parent co into one valuation. And I think this, at its core, is what makes this comparison so difficult. Going back to the Forbes sport list, we don't compare like billionaires to billionaires or big conglomerates to big conglomerates. We stick to each individual brand. Here's an example. Robert Kraft owns the New England Patriots in the NFL and owns the New England Revolution in the MLS League. But we don't lump them together and compare their value against, let's say, MSG, which has stakes in the Knicks and Rangers, etc. We compare them individually. So the only solution is which esports team, like a single team, is the most valuable in the world. But even that is so flawed because some teams use the same name across multiple game titles. So they would really have a competitive advantage in the brand value versus ones that don't. I give up. There's just no perfect way to figure out valuations of esports orgs the way they're structured. And okay, wait a second. One more idea. Okay. So since sponsorships are the biggest revenue driver in the esports industry and arguably the most objective measurement of a team or a fan base's value, the list should be solely weighted on sponsorship. How well can a brand monetize their assets with brand activations? Seems like the best way. But again, it's still flawed, since many good orgs have direct monetization from their fan base and don't rely on sponsorships. So why should they be penalized in a valuation chart like that? Okay, one more try, okay? I think I got this. Let's let the brands rank them. Let the sponsors rank who they feel are the most valuable orgs in terms of them putting money into esports. It's not perfect, but I think would give you an objective valuation from the people who matter and which property is worth more. So let's pull BMW and Citibank and all sorts of sponsors and say, rank the top 15 brands that you would want to put into, and then we have a more objective understanding of which esports org and which brand is the most valuable in the world. But again, that's still so heavily flawed because it doesn't really address value. I'm stuck. I don't know. I've thought about it so many times. I've put together a lot of different matrices on how we could do this. There's just no way to really value esports orgs in a fair, objective way. So as much as I think the Forbes list methodology is complete dog, there might not be a better one. And maybe Forbes is right. Maybe this is the most accurate way to value esports orgs. Feel so defeated. Okay, let's try one more metric. Earnings, esports earnings, prize pools, that should be the currency of success and brand value. Totally not. That's like one of the worst metrics, even though it's so obvious, is because some of the most valuable brands in the world suck. The Knicks, the Leafs, the Cowboys, the Jets. We can't equate winning, whether it being for money or not, to a brand's value. They're like totally separate, and in many ways it doesn't even matter. So what is Forbes to do? What are we all to do with valuing esports orgs? There's no answer. Let me know what you think. Do you have a better way to value esports orgs? I don't think this list is off. I think if I were to rank them myself, I'd probably have the top 8 in there anyway, but how are we really justifying it, and what methodology are we using, and things like that. All right, let me know who would be in your top 10, who's number 1, how can we have a more objective standard to value esports orgs, because it's an important data point. Good job, Forbes, you did your very best. I respect you. I don't agree with the methodology, but I respect you for trying. I'm Ben Feferman, that is Esports Unfiltered. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We really count on you. Stay classy, Cape Town, and I'm out of here. It's just flawed. Like, even if you say the revenue, even if you were to say, well, 50% has to come from esports revenue. What's esports revenue? Everyone's going to disagree. Is it hoodies? Is it hats? Is it content? Is it media? Is it player performance? Is it academies? Is it challenger?
I feel like the only thing that's truly esports revenue is literally tournament winnings.
That's not a good.
That's a terrible matrix.
It's like saying the most valuable brands, are the ones that win the most championships.
Yeah.
Totally not.
No.